Hey, what's up, guys? Britton here. Just want to read through a short essay that I just wrote in my blog. Hadn't written in my blog for a while, but I'm getting back into it, and I'll put a link to it in the description below. Um, I It's basically about an important distinction that it's a distinction between personality and character. It's almost similar to a nature versus nurture sort of debate, but I think it's a little more than that. Anyway, I'll just read through it. Here it goes. So, as you may know, I'm a big fan of personality studies. The personality system that has been researched the most by academics in psychology is the Big Five. Deals with five cardinal personality traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. And that's where one who is interested in the most cutting-edge fact-based research should look. But there are other personality systems that have taken off in popularity. Myers-Briggs, which is more or less sort of based on Jungian functions. Enneagram, Herman and Brain dominance model are just a few that are used by individuals to improve their lives, and consulting groups all over North America to revamp businesses. And despite what little formal scientific research has been done to confirm the cogency of these systems, that is, not Big Five, but the others that I mentioned, the results generally speak for themselves. They've all had reasonable success in boosting employee satisfaction and productivity, and they have increased profit for those businesses too. Regardless of whether or not you believe in personality, there is something to it. And to explain these systems away, because they may or may not have all of their facts straight, is to really overlook the utility they provide in personal and business development. It's not that the facts don't matter, but what constitutes fact isn't always easy to determine. The average half-life of a scientific fact, in fact, is only about 7 years. And what I mean by half-life is the amount of time it takes for a fact to become either irrelevant or proven false relative to its stated purpose or intentions. So a half-life of a scientific fact is only about 7 years, and that's an average across all scientific disciplines. So as we know, facts in physics tend to hold out much longer than those in the social sciences. But when a fact in physics turns out to be wrong, for example, it's often much more broadly and profoundly wrong, and thus more difficult to accept, because so much has been built on its foundation. Now, there's nothing that people hate more than the idea, or any idea which compromises the integrity of their foundation, of their sort of belief structure. But when truth happens, we must be willing to change accordingly. And this is where science can be its own worst enemy, because after all, it takes humans with subjective goals and motivations to interpret numbers and to make something useful out of those findings. Remember, science is a tool, not a belief system. So we have to be willing to let go of certain ideas in science for the sake of progress. But that's a discussion for another time. This is especially important today for social issues in the universities. I think that moving forward, personality research will play a crucial role in creating a stronger foundation for the humanities and social sciences, which currently first of all, they're currently corrupt by neo-Marxism, which implies that they flat out reject any difference in nature among humans. They're aiming toward this absolute equality or equity anyway. This extreme socialism. I think personality will also play a crucial role for better understanding how to sort out this massive mess, which was made very real to me just the other night in the pub, actually. I had always known about Marxism in universities, especially today, but I don't know. I didn't know that it was so close to me, even when I was at LSU in grad school for a semester. But I went out with a couple of my friends, and I realized that those ideas had infected even people who were close to me. So anyway, here's the story. I was out for some beers having an argument with a couple of old grad school friends. They were debating each other why women are underrepresented in philosophy departments when they are overrepresented in the other humanities, which is probably something else I could talk about in more detail later on, but I'll just skim over it now for the sake of the general points. Their disagreements seem to be between narrow social issues, as one might expect from two young, impressionable minds whose opinions haven't yet been optimized to think outside the social constructionist box of academia, because that's what Marxism supports, is a social constructionist view of reality, basically, of social reality. One of my friends, my female friend, argued that direct oppression of women was the cause, and the other, my male friend, argued that systematic corruption was the problem, which, unbeknownst to them, is more or less the same thing. So their disagreements were fundamentally semantic. When I brought up differences in male and female personalities as a solution, leaving open for discussion what those differences might be, for the sake of argument, even though I already knew what those differences were, they seemed to reject it without giving it any serious consideration. Shocking, right? They didn't want to accept that people might actually be innately different. And as a philosopher type, why wouldn't you want to be different, I thought. That's not to say, though, as I tried to explain, that nurture doesn't play some crucial role, but they insisted on sticking to the nurture side of the debate while rejecting altogether the nature side. I was even being more centrist about the issue than I should have been because I wanted to facilitate good discussion, but that didn't work as it was 2 versus 1. There were a couple of ironies in their rejection of my ideas. The first is that they were clearly embodying their natural male-female differences in the specific positions that they originally took. Generally speaking, women are more agreeable than men, and so they're more interested in people, while men are more interested in ideas and systems. So it's no wonder my female friend was defending the group identity-based female oppression position, and my male friend was defending the politico-systematic corruption position. I dared not point that out because they became more aggressive once they began to realize that their positions were more or less the same and only founded on semantic disagreement, so that kind of gave them an excuse to, team up against me, right? So from that point, their team approach in attempting to defeat me brought up the second irony in their argument, that in agreeing with each other in the fashion that they did, they were acting out the group identity role that is so characteristic of people who take the far left position on social issues, which is something that they had already admitted to being far left on most social issues. They oriented their arguments onto a foundation of equality, kindness, and compassion rather than on a desire to get to the truth, which is what good philosophical discussion is. Or at least to let truth present itself through three-way discussion. When I attempted to explain what a Pareto distribution is, the phenomenon where if given equal opportunity, people's natural differences will manifest, thereby causing a necessary unequal distribution of success, they simply got mad, to make a short story shorter. In my male friend's defense, he unknowingly proved that his constructionist position was at least somewhat justified by virtue of the simple fact that he's from Seattle. So he's sort of a slave of his own cunty liberal reasoning, right? After all. And then my female friend, on the other hand, though, She comes from a conservative family in Georgia, and she carries a gun in her purse. So what the hell is her excuse, right? Anyway, it seemed that the further we went down the rabbit hole, the more we started to talk past one another. For we were operating at different levels of analysis to begin with. They thought I was just flat out wrong, and I thought they were missing the point. So we were going nowhere fast. They first disagreed with each other about which of the narrow social issues was the cause of the lack of women in philosophy, but they both agreed on the broader presupposition that social constructionism was correct. When I questioned that point, that more general point, they got angry. But this is what we're supposed to do in philosophy. We're supposed to broaden an issue as much as we possibly can in order to find the most reasonable general perspective on which we can ground the known facts. And a more reasonable general position than one that's like currently established could also help shape the facts or point the facts in the right direction. Now, if you can't think that broadly, or at least keep your emotions in check while others are doing so, then philosophy is not for you. And there are plenty of people who are in philosophy programs, by the way, who cannot do this. And it's pretty annoying, especially when you're in a seminar, especially when that person is a fucking professor, which I told you in my Why I Quit Grad School video, told you about. But as we are all graduate level philosophizers of sorts, I thought like that would have been fun. And it got a bit dirtier than any of us probably would have liked. But anyway, looking back, a crucial distinction arose that I now see should have been dealt with from the beginning, and that's the distinction between personality and character. Personality is what I consider to be one's innate baseline temperament. This is obviously difficult to control for scientifically because there are so many layers of environmental and social cultural influence accrued over a lifetime that are stacked on top of that, nature base. But there's still the personality, which is your default mode of temperament that goes largely unchanged throughout your life. And this is why two or more siblings who are raised under identical conditions will turn out so different. It's because they are different. They require different sorts and degrees of attention, etc. And if you have a sibling, you know this. You're not just like your sibling, unless you are. But that's really an oddity. So how that personality is cultivated, though, whatever that baseline personality temperament is, how it's cultivated encompasses one's character. And this is more or less the same concept as Aristotle's state of character that he described in his Nicomachean Ethics. And this is where free moral will comes in. One habituates himself into making the right moral decisions to cultivate his virtues and to deal with his vices. And that forms the character. Perhaps I should call personality temperament and character personality. Perhaps this semantic point is actually where my friends didn't get it, where we kind of talked past one another. If I had clarified that semantic point, maybe we wouldn't have gotten so dirty in arguing with each other. But anyway, I'm trying to be clear here for the essay. So anyway, just a few I think correct and incorrect points on both sides. Where the social constructionist, where the social constructionist is right, over say a radical materialist personality advocate, Eric Braverman, for example, wrote a book called The Edge Effect, who bases all of personality on brain functions. Where the social constructionist is more right, I think, is that at the end of the day, one's character is what's important, and that we can habituate ourselves into projecting a certain image that can lead us to a successful and fulfilling life. But what the social constructionists get wrong is that we are a slave to societal norms, that we're all the same, and to push back against the patriarchy is the only thing that we can do about that. And it's funny because this view can actually be explained from a personality perspective. Social constructionists are liberal in their political views, which implies that they are generally low in Big Five trait conscientiousness, which deals with orderliness, industriousness, productivity, organization, etc. So they wouldn't want to put in the necessary work to make positive changes in their lives to begin with. Or at least they're less likely to motivate themselves to follow through with that. So by this logic, they're simply not allowed to deny the existence of personality. What the materialists correctly presuppose, on the other hand, probably without even knowing, is that we should come to understand our baseline temperament, and when cultivating our personality into character, we should not stray from that default mode of being, or else we'll live a dishonest and unfulfilling life. What they get wrong, ironically, is that life has no purpose, that we're nothing more than biology, and there's no meaning to life, I guess. Pragmatically speaking, this can't work either. And so I challenge a materialist to actually go out into the world and attempt to live life as though it has no purpose, as though his thoughts and actions are predetermined by brain functions, because he has no free will by his own logic. If you do this, one will necessarily fall into a nihilistic, self-deprecating philosophy, which would lead to a quick and painful demise, not only for him, but for everyone around him for whom he is a purpose. So our personality, or our temperament, whatever you want to call it, is our default mode that we should strip from our societal influence to properly understand our potential, to the extent that that's possible. And also, if we're individual enough to manage that, and allow Terence McKenna to give you some advice about that, psychedelic drugs can help. Psychedelic drugs kind of they'll either take you out of your context or unite you with your context in a way that you'll understand yourself to be in such intimate contact with your contexts, but in such intimate contact with yourself apart from that context at the same time, that you can see the truth of that interaction, that interplay between context and personality. I don't know if that was clear, but anyway, our character is what we have made of that potential. So our personality temperament is our default mode of being. We strip it from our societal influence to properly understand our potential, if we're individual enough to manage that. Our character is what we have made of that potential. And it is only a good character if we have taken the time to understand what lies beneath it. And that's the personality. Now, those can be both good and evil things. Or they are good and evil things. We're all capable of both. Our character, our being, is the ever-evolving vessel that we use to navigate the world that only we have the power to control. We cannot wholly exist apart from our environment. Our being is not our nature or our nurture, but it is precisely the abstract interplay between the two and how we choose to act accordingly. But not only how we choose to act accordingly, but how we do so without regret. And that was a little bit that I took from a talk by Terence McKenna. But anyway, if you want to check out the essay to read it without all the fluff in between that I gave you, you can do so via the link in the description below. And I also have some sources that I cited throughout that essay on the blog that I didn't really give you here. So let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.